The good thing in logistics is when you go to somebody and say, can I move boxes for you? Everybody says yes. No, nobody says no. We knew the Zomato founders back when it was called Foodie Bay, Dipinder and Pankaj. We were talking to them and we said, look, why don't you do delivery services as well? And they said at that time that, no, we don't want to do this. So we said, why don't we give it a shot? And famous last words, I suppose, for them.
So what was the reaction of the guy who was going to sell you the vans? Did he ask you any questions?
We said we want 6 white Maruti vans and we were willing to pay immediately.
And with dark glasses or dark windows or no windows?
Cargo van. When he joined us, we had only 3 chairs. So when he came to interview with us, this guy from IIT Kanpur, his spectacular CV, we gave him one of the chairs. We said, we really want to hire you, aap is chair pe baitho.
And what was the motivation to go public?
So one was that we wanted to put some distance between ourselves and our competitors by saying we will be the standard to which the others are held. Reality is the day you decide to start a business, you are always under scrutiny. When we started out, our families were scrutinizing us, right? They would be like, kya kar rahe ho? Your employees are scrutinizing you and your customers are scrutinizing you. So I disagree with the, strangers work better together. The great privilege of our life has been we get to come into work every single day for 15 years and work with our closest friends there. The advantage is trust is built fast. I think we do argue a lot at Delhivery. We still do. We're comfortable with long and tedious arguments and sometimes not moving forward until we're absolutely convinced. But the reality is, look, a guy on a bike is potentially a competitor to Delhivery. That's the way we look at it.
There's one more thing. Around the time when you started the company, you mentioned that there are a few of you guys in Gurgaon that went to a place to buy a handful of vans. And it was around the time when Gangs of Wasseypur also was released. So what was the reaction of the guy who was going to sell you the vans? Did he ask you any questions?
Yeah, he was shocked. So Suraj and I went to the Maruti Suzuki showroom in Old Gurgaon. And I think the guy instinctively, we were still out of Bain, so we were wearing a shirt. We looked pretty respectable. And he wanted to sell us, he thought we were there for a passenger car. And then we said we want 6 white Maruti vans and we were willing to pay immediately.
And with dark glasses or dark windows or no windows?
Cargo van. So this guy looked at us and you could see the gears in his head are turning and he's thinking, kidnapper lag to nahi rahe hain, but so he asked us, he said, why do you want 6 Maruti vans? Like, nobody's ever asked for these. We said, but you still make them, right? So he's like, yeah, we still make them, but we don't have them. We'll have to order them. So I think he asked us a lot about background. He asked us, kaun ho, kahan se ho? Then I said, Suraj IIT se padha hai. I'm from IIT, trust us. This van will be put to good uses. I still remember 2.3 lakh rupees a van. We even offered to pay in cash.
You offered to pay in cash?
We thought we'll get a discount.
That must have raised the antennas, yeah.
But it's quite amazing to hear that, and that being the origin story of where we are sitting right now. It's near Bangalore in Hoskote, this facility. As we were driving in, Sreejan and I, we're feeling proud, but we are also quite amazed because it's one thing to build a bits business which is digital. It's a completely different ball game to build something that is physical, that's real, that's the atoms. And so maybe for the uninitiated, because I think delivery has touched millions of lives over the years, but people still may not completely recognize or understand it. So maybe you can help us understand from the time someone clicks to buy something on an e-commerce website to the time the doorbell rings and the package arrives, what does it take to ship every single parcel on time to the right receiver and in the right condition, and how complex is that process?
And also the context also, Sahil, is that delivery as of today is the backbone of e-commerce in India. Yeah? But what people know more about is all the e-commerce companies, all the e-commerce platforms. So it would be good for them to understand how delivery plays a role in this entire ecosystem and the value chain. And as Shobhit asked, when you click and receive, how does that work?
Yeah, so an old logistics hand once made a comment which I thought was pretty telling. He said, logistics isn't rocket science, but it's very, very close. overall, right? Just this is going to be slightly long in a way to explain why it's complex, but compare the movement of all of these boxes to the movement of, for example, passengers on air travel, international air travel. You as a passenger first decide, let's say you live in Japan or Singapore and you say, I want to go to Brazil. You go onto the right website, you figure out your ticket, you make sure you get the right date, you make sure you pick, the right airlines you want to go on, you make sure you have all the baggage allowances. A couple of days before you check in, the day you want to leave, you book your taxi, go to the airport on time, check in yourself, drop your bags off, go to security check, get onto the right aircraft at the right gate at the right time, go to your designated seat, store your bag, get off in Brazil or wherever it is, and then do the same thing in reverse, get to your hotel, and probably call your wife or your mom and say, I got here and I'm fine. Now imagine you have to do that to something which doesn't have agency, which is a box. And then imagine like us, you have to do that 1 billion times a year. And you have to do it right, hopefully 1 billion times a year. So it's actually a fairly complex process. Fundamentally, outside of the physical act of moving boxes, which is what delivery is all about, the hard part of getting your e-commerce order or ton of freight or whatever it is to you is planning and orchestrating exactly all of the things I spoke about. When are you going to pick up a box? When are you going to bring it into, this facility, for example, in Bangalore? If it's an order going to Punjab, are you going to take it through Bombay? Are you going to take it through Delhi? What truck is it going to go on? When do you expect it to land up at those respective places? How do you connect it forward onto the next location? And in between, of course, deal with the variabilities of traffic, of weather, and a dozen other conditions that can cause a problem. You have to have contingency plans. So the hard part of what we do and where our systems, our technology, our automation come in are from picking up, planning everything from picking up to delivering it to you. And then along the way, of course, the other hard part is the human problem. I think when people buy something online, it's a little bit like magic, right? It's kind of appears at your doorstep. You order something online and then suddenly the next thing you know is a guy rings your bell and he's there. But the average package is probably touched by the guy who picks it up, the guy who drives the vehicle to bring it here.
And you pick it up right from the source. So wherever the merchant is, you go and pick it up from there.
That's right. So in Amazon, for example, if you go and buy, one of the things I buy is this pickle a fiddlehead fern pickle which comes from Himachal. There's a guy who goes and picks it up from the lady who makes it.
Oh, wow.
And then takes it to a facility, hands it off. So something like 15 different people will handle your product along the way to make sure that you get it on time. So it's a complex dance.
No, it is, and maybe we should go back to how all this started as well. I think the first company which you guys started was called the Delivery Company, and then it moved to Delivery, and now it's a $5 billion company. So how was it when you guys decided to start this company? What was the origin story? How did you think about getting into logistics? And by the way, logistics is not necessarily a sector which people think about day in and day out. Even while we were studying, it was not necessarily the most sought after subject. So how did you think about it, and how did you get together to start?
On a lighter note, I just came on board 6 months ago, so I don't know.
So it was already done by the
It was done by the other guys by then. No. How we stumbled into it, man. So Suraj, Mohit and I worked together at Bain. We started out at Bain, and at various points we'd all worked in the telecom communication space. We were doing radio frequency planning, tower planning for an operator, and then two of them quit. They were off on an externship. I figured I wanted to work with them more than I wanted to work at Bain, and so I left. And we were kind of bumming around. We knew the Zomato founders back when it was called Foodie Bay, Dipinder and Pankaj. And we were talking to them and we said, look, why don't you guys, since you do the marketing for restaurants and you have menu aggregation, why don't you do delivery services as well? And they said at that time that, no, we don't want to do this. So we said, why don't we give it a shot? And famous last words, I suppose, for them. And so we decided to give it a shot, and we started by delivering food.
In Delhi or in Gurgaon?
Gurgaon at the time.
And then you partnered with Dipinder and his Foodie Bay company at that time?
Not exactly. So what happened is, because they had all of these restaurant customers, they were kind enough to sort of introduce us to them. So we would go and say, do you know Dipinder and Pankaj? They would say yes. We're like, oh, so you're on Foodie Bay. Like, yes, can we deliver for you? The good thing in logistics is when you go to somebody and say, can I move boxes for you? Everybody says yes. No, nobody says no. So that's how it all began. And then at that time, a couple of e-commerce companies started reaching out. There was a company called Urban Touch, which used to do cosmetics. So think of a very early Nykaa, in a way, and Health Cart, which is delivering protein to bodybuilders, I think, in Gurgaon. And they said, can you guys deliver in half an hour if you can do food? And we said, yeah, why not? So that's when we realized our volume started going up, and then...
So the origin of quick commerce comes from there, yeah? Because you were delivering in 30 minutes.
The world goes full circle, man. So, but yeah, so, and actually weirdly enough, at that time a small company called Flipkart had raised $10 million from, I think, Axel and Tiger. And so we said, look, there's something in this whole e-commerce industry. Let's go and find out why these customers are coming to us. And we went over to one of our competitors. We went over to the local Blue Dart store and said, how do you guys deliver packages? And Suraj and I tried to send one to each other. And long story short, we realized their model didn't necessarily lend itself to what was coming, down the pike with e-commerce. And that's when we got thinking, and we said, "Nahi, this model doesn't work for India." Yeah. Fortunately, since we'd done telecom, we had some ideas about how to model, what we thought the network would look like in the future. And by then, Kapil and Bhavesh had also come on. Interestingly, they also had exposure to telecom, to a certain amount of operations research, network design. And, before we knew it, we had written out some ideas about how the whole thing would work, the network. And that's it, man. We stumbled into it, and, here we are.
And when did you change the name from the delivery company to Delhivery?
When we printed the first visiting card. Because the delivery company wouldn't fit on the visiting card. Okay. And so we said we need a new name, and we couldn't come up with one. So Suraj was driving to Faridabad and the radio in his car wasn't working. So having nothing better to do, he was thinking of names for the company. And so he called Mohit and me in the middle of the night saying, what do you guys think of the company name Delhivery? And so we were like, but it's, that's already the delivery company. How does, no, with an H. So we're like, okay. And he was really pleased with himself. Like he was like, I've cracked it. This is the name. and then he's like, do you guys like it? And then Mohit was like, no, not really. But I think, do you have a better idea? We said, no. Then this is the name.
So did you guys check the domain name and all, whether it existed or at that?
Can you imagine it was such a bad name that nobody had got the domain name?
No, I think it's a pretty good name. Delhivery, I mean, credit to Suraj of thinking of this.
Actually,
name.
Now when we say that, do you know delivery, and people don't think of the original word delivery, they can relate to. There's a brand recall now.
You should see our first visiting card, man. It was so bad. We were trying to be creative, and on our visiting card it said delivery in an italic font to signify speed, and the L was the Qutub Minar.
Actually,
okay,
Qutub Minar.
Yeah. I had done Photoshop duties in the past, and so I was in charge of this. So we converted a bad idea into a worse idea.
No, and so at some point, hopefully, delivery would become as common as, you used to have Xerox kar le. Okay. Delivery kar le types. Hope so. Yeah. No, but moving on, I think, Sahil, we spoke about this when Shobhit and I had a call with you as well. You talked about these 4 different phases of delivery. Today you're IPO'd and you're a listed company. That journey itself is quite interesting. So we would love to hear about that. But maybe you could talk about how you look at delivery, the progress in the different phases. When you started the early stage, when you got to assemble the team, when you got professionals on board, when you raised a huge amount of funding as well, and then leading up to the IPO, and also, post IPO.
And also, as you talk through it, delivery also is a very interesting, and I'd be keen to also hear how the investors responded to this. It's not really followed a very linear trajectory. It has had its own phases of build, consolidate, and then really scale. And then you've done it, and you've just done it extremely well over a long period of time.
Yeah, we've been doing this 15 years. When we started out, really the early days were, like we spoke about, driven mainly just by energy more than anything else, right? We felt like we had this network model, and now, and nobody wanted to come work for us back in the day. Logistics was not sexy in 2011. And, you go to people and you say, would you like to join Suraj, Mohit, Bhavesh, Kapil and I? And they'd be like, a courier company. Like, no, not really. And also, if you worked at Blue Dart or at FedEx or wherever else, joining Delhivery was a fairly serious step down. Right? You were going from a 2,000 crore company to a bunch of guys in an 800 square foot office. So phase one was really us just accumulating these really young, talented guys who we had to bet on. We had no other option, and they.
But how did you convince these young, talented?
It's insane, man. The first set of guys who joined Delhivery, as I look back at them, there's a guy called Amit Ambasta, who was our first tech guy. He was Bhavesh's junior from engineering school. We had Vikas Kapoor, who now runs our full truck business. He's been with the company for all practical purposes. These guys are all co-founders, man. He came to us from Bain. So he had just started at Bain. I think he'd done a year and a half, and he actually just called us up and said, I want to come and work with you guys. And we had no idea why. And we didn't ask. Because we said, chalo, there's somebody who wants to
I'm sure you're being humble.
No, we actually didn't ask him, man. Sure. And he just showed up. And he wouldn't go. He came on Feb 14th, 2012, and he said, I'm here and ab mujhe kaam de do. And we started. And then, we had a guy called Hani, who was graduating out of Symbiosis in Pune. And he worked at L&T, and I can't imagine why he wanted to join us, but he called on our landline phone at 11 in the night.
And there was someone to pick the phone at 11 in the night.
And so Hani and I had a long conversation at some 11 in the night. And we spoke about nothing to do with logistics. We spoke about football for half an hour and realized we fought about respective football teams. And I asked him, do you want to join? And he said, yeah, sounds like a fun place, I'll join. So all our first hires, Milind, Vikas, Amit, our CFO who's just leaving, Amit Agarwal, same situation. When he joined us, we had only 3 chairs. So when he came to interview with us, this guy from IIT Kanpur, his spectacular CV, we gave him one of the chairs. We said, we really want to hire you, aap is chair pe baitho. And some of us will leave the office.
So people stood and...
So that was phase one. It was just collecting this nucleus which was energetic and wanted to be part of this problem. And that got us a certain distance. We pushed out, we would all deliver packages, we would all sort packages. We were doing everything. Second phase was, like you were saying, where we said, okay, now, as founders, we felt like we needed to bring in somebody to help us.
And by second phase, you had already raised some funding.
We'd raised, I think we'd done 2 rounds by then. We'd raised about 3 or 4 million.
And did you already form a board by then?
No, not by then. Not at this stage.
But InfoEdge had already come in.
Times was our first investor, then Nexus Venture Partners had come in, and Multiples had just invested in our third round in 2014 towards the end. And then Tiger came in short order. But around 14 is when we said, we really need to bring in senior guys to help us. And in a theme, perhaps we sort of turned to people we knew. Sandeep Barasia was actually my boss's boss at Bain, but I'd had the opportunity to work with him, and Suraj and Mohit and I had all worked with him very closely. And we knew he was thinking about leaving Bain at the time, and he was a partner, so we said, why don't you think about joining us? And it was just a friendly conversation. We weren't sure whether he would say yes, and amazingly, he turned around and he said, yeah, why not? Should be fun, what's the worst? We were doing at that stage, I think 150 crores odd of revenue. And so Sandeep came and joined us at the time. Ajit had joined us 2 years earlier. He was my classmate. And the way we thought about him joining also was, I told Suraj, look, this guy knows more finance than anybody else. So let's make him the CFO. And Ajit agreed to become the CFO of, at that time when he joined, a company whose turnover was 17 crores. or something like that. So then, but that was part of the professional management and sort of almost now co-founders, like I said. So we started getting a bunch of these senior guys in. We said we need to beef up operations, business development, product and technology. So that was sort of phase 2, where a core management team started really emerging. We had the energy from the young guys, and then we brought in some structure with the professional managers. And that took us another 4-5 years to really sort of put together.
And how did you manage these senior people, because given the kind of industry you were operating in, people who had a lot of experience, they come with a lot of ego as well at times, or with their own views. And this was a young team which was running the company. Was there any friction at that time? Or
also, people that have a lot of domain expertise or industry experience, oftentimes you want to find that right balance between what is legacy, with all due respect, legacy knowledge versus new things that you want to bring in to disrupt. How did you find that balance?
To be honest, I think it's a greater credit to the people who came in than the people who were here. Because the reality is that they were somehow able to bring what they knew and mold Delhivery's culture, to a large extent. I think what helped is a couple of things. The size of the problem itself was so large that there was enough space for all forms of, insight or knowledge to coexist. They weren't competing. And so when Suraju, for example, came in having run operations at FedEx for 2 decades, there was enough space for both the structure of what he had learned at FedEx and for the innovation that we were trying to drive from a technology standpoint, that they didn't conflict too much. And the problem was always so large, and we were growing so fast at the time that we didn't really end up in a lot of conflict. That said, did everybody have a point of view on what we should be doing, how we should be doing it, and so on? Of course, when you hire senior guys, that's sort of what their mandate is to begin with. I think we do argue a lot at Delhivery. We still do. It's not, and we're comfortable with the process of having these long and tedious arguments and sometimes not moving forward until we're absolutely convinced. And so we just had to do it. And the good thing is that there were specific decisions that specific people took calls on. For example, when it came to things like pricing, when it came to capital allocation, Ajit would have a fairly large say on those matters. When it came to operations and managing people, ultimately, so Raju and Suraj would have a large say. When it came to technology, it was Kapil. So we learned how to sort of defer to each other also a little bit over time. But did we have our share of sort of conflict and shouting matches back in the 2015, 16, 17 timeframe? We really did. But I guess that's part of, the company growing.
So that was the second phase of Delhivery, and then
2019, 18-19 happened.
By the second phase, you already had a board constituted.
So like we brought in professional management, we said we need a professional board.
And so we hear stories sometimes, like, for example, you have Tiger in your as an investor, and Tiger typically doesn't want to be on the board. That is their general philosophy. Yeah, but it seems like they chose, or you forced them to be part of the board. So how did you go about setting up your board? And we ask, Shobhit and I are selfish as well, because as we go along this journey, at some point we'll have to think about our board as well.
See, getting an independent board is, again, we thought of it as a strategic advantage. One is we brought in directors who we believed would be able to ask us sort of interesting questions as we were going outside e-commerce into the broader swath of the logistics industry. These were people who came with experience on boards of manufacturing companies, or, where somebody, Anjali Bansal was on the board of a number of Tata companies, for example, introduced us to future clients. We had a lady called Hannah Sorensen who came in, who had deep experience at Maersk and at Damco. So she helped us a lot with thinking about what, our customer contracts would look like, what, our people would look like, or, our footprint of people would look like years down the line. Srirajan was at Bain, he helped us a lot of the time. Deepak Kapoor was at PwC, so he really helped us build financial systems. So it became a strategic advantage. The independent board in the beginning was a sort of, let me put it this way, they would add 10% to the management team. almost in a way, right? And that helped us a lot. So as you think about it, I guess the other reason, of course, as you think about it, you should have an independent board as early as possible. The other thing I think is that founders it's very hard to guard against drinking your own Kool-Aid, right? Because and I'll confess, I'm fairly sure there are times when my team has looked at me or looked at the other founders and said, these guys are sort of, getting high on their own supply. So the board kind of reins you in at that moment, right? And says, look, calm down. The other thing that the board helped us with was we had investors, all of whom had different points of view about the company, right? And as you guys raise capital, that'll happen. You'll have, by the time we got our independent board together, we had Times, which was a customer. We had Nexus, which was an early VC. We had Multiples, which was an Indian PE. And we had Tiger Global. Now you can imagine these are 4 very different kinds of voices on the board. And the next set that we got was Fosun, a Chinese strategic. Then we had Carlyle, which was a global PE. And then we had SoftBank.
So you had all kind of investors there.
Absolutely. And then the question becomes, you realize you're not running a company at some point, but board meetings can end up looking a little bit like a zoo, right? Because everybody's got these different ideas.
Everyone is value adding as well.
Absolutely. Investors come with analysts. Analysts have to do something. And
I know. I sat on the board of few companies with some of these people as well. So you feel the urge to add value when you are sitting in the board meeting.
And to be fair, some of the ideas weren't necessarily bad. They just were things that we couldn't do at those times, And I'll give you one example, right? There was this time in the sort of mid 2015s to 18s kind of period where I remember every Indian company was saying, startup of our kind was saying, we will expand into other markets. We will go into Dubai and we will go into Sri Lanka. And
a lot of people did.
And they did.
Zomato expanded to almost...
Well, they were in some 30 odd countries or something like that. And so people would look
at
that.
Went to so many different countries. And without necessarily understanding the dynamics of how business operates in these countries. But yeah.
And that was coming up in the board meetings as well?
That, there was a time where it would come up with 1 or 2 of the investors would say, look, this strategy seems to be working for other companies. Have you considered going to Dubai? Now, of course, what starts out as a very innocuous question, have you considered going to Dubai, becomes, I must go to Dubai and figure out how to build a business. And that's where the independent board becomes very useful, right? They can come and say, look, Sahil, this is a really bad idea. And to be fair, we did go to Dubai and tried and we burned ourselves. Fortunately, we burned a very small amount of money. I think we lost some 50 lakhs or, whatever, in some ill-fated warehouse in the free zone. And our board came and said, look, this is a very bad idea. Don't do it. And so you kind of have the board for that reason. And they kind of marshal the investors. Also make sure that a single voice doesn't, guide the decisions that the company is taking. Because imagine, we had Carlyle, which, for example, very early on would come with the point of view that your business planning needs to become more predictable. You're going to start looking like a large company which will go public. And while that was correct, we also at the same time had, for instance, Tiger, which was saying, while not directly, why aren't you growing faster? Just grow as fast as you can. And then you had a Chinese strategic, which had a completely different sort of point of view on the business. And so managing that, I think the board really helped. We could go to the board and say, this is where we want to drive. Now we need to marshal these 10 people towards that ambition. So that's when the professional management team, professional board came together. So think of it as laying the foundation. Stage 1 was digging, stage 2 was building the foundation. Stage 3 was post 2019. When SoftBank came in, our cap table looked firm. Our economics had started making sense. We were doing sort of a broader set of businesses than we'd started out with.
And you got a lot of money invested in Delhivery. So how did you rein yourself in to not spend all this money? Because a lot of people, when they get money, and a lot of young founders, when they get
past
money.
Decade, in fact, we have, and international expansion was in part, a lot of companies now admit that it was triggered by the fact that they had access to this large amount of capital. India was a good market, but there was now opportunity to invest. How did you refrain yourself or put a leash and say that we still need to be thoughtful about how we are allocating capital?
Yeah, that's where I think having the professional management team, the board and the founders having a certain view of the business really did help. We knew from day one that it is not easy, while it may be difficult to make money in the beginning in logistics, it's equally quite hard to lose a lot of money in logistics. And there are only a set of fairly defined ways you can lose money, which is you misprice terribly to go and get market share and eventually burn out all your money. And I think that's a decision we took very early, saying we will not misprice our services. We will, of course, focus on being more efficient every year. So we established a pretty strong cost-based structure to the business. We still have that. We're fairly disciplined about all of our costs, and that made sure that we never went down wild paths. The international expansion thing was just very simple. We went to Dubai and we said we will try it out. We put up a warehouse in the free trade zone, and then we realized, unlike India where we knew how to hire people to come and work in a warehouse, we failed at step number one. We opened the warehouse and couldn't find anybody to work in it. And then we realized, look, hiring, Egyptians or Pakistanis to work in a warehouse in Dubai is really not what the company is any good at. So our international dreams died very fast. So we have the ability to kill dreams very fast and kind of build that up.
I think in some way that is actually quite good, so that you can focus on what the core is. And India, at 2019, India was still a huge market, and logistics still continues to be very fragmented market.
Hindsight is 2020 also, to be honest. Now that I think about it, we did try to do food delivery again. Okay. And that was a bad choice, right? We tried to do it in 2000, I'm going to say 18, which is about when Zomato finally launched it. Swiggy was trying to do well, and Zomato also launched. And I remember we had a conversation with Zomato and they said, can you help us out with this and do some of our logistics?
Did you tell them I told you so?
No, I think it may have happened over a beer with Pankaj. I don't remember us saying, what happened to you never doing logistics. But no, we actually tried it again, and incredibly enough, we knew it. We did the math, and our own math told us that a third-party logistics company would never make money delivering food. And I have no exact recollection of why we said, let us question the math. But in a battle between math and a business model, unfortunately, math wins in the end, every single time, and that's what happened. I think we again got in. We spent 6 months. We were doing okay. Never made any money. But the good thing is, I think, from a capital allocation standpoint, we've always tried to keep our downsides limited, and we know where we have to exit. So even if we get to sort of a certain point and feel like we burned more money than we thought, and we're not in control, we've sort of built the discipline of exiting. But we had a lot of capital going into our IPO as well.
So the third phase then was when you were growing and the investment came in. How did that then move into IPO and all?
Yeah, that's this, like I said, we dug the hole in the ground, then built the foundation. The next step was building all the rooms in the house, right? And that was all of the new businesses that we were launching. We started out as a parcel company, went out and built, part truckload freight, did warehousing and supply chain. We built a full truck business. And a lot of it was our management team at that point, which had learned operations, learned the basics of how logistics worked over 3-4 years. Now really starting to take charge and building these individual businesses. So we were essentially putting on heft, as a business. We knew we wanted to go public. Our first goal actually was 2020. But then obviously COVID happened and everything happened. And so we said we need to be a large scale business for the public markets to absorb this and take it seriously. And so that was really phase 3.
And what was the motivation to go public?
For too long, we'd always been judged by the yardsticks that much sort of older logistics companies were judged by, and our whole point was that these are not the right metrics with which you look at Indian logistics. So one was that we wanted to put some distance between ourselves and our competitors by saying we will be the standard to which the others are held. The second is it was also strategic because our clients care a lot. A well-governed public logistics company is an entity that it's not difficult to go to an enterprise customer and convince them to work with. And we had customers who cared about compliance, right? We serve Walmart, Amazon, IKEA, H&M, Zara, large Indian corporates who are very bothered about the quality of the companies they work with. And the good thing is your accounts are now public. People know you're a going concern. You're being audited. Your practices are clean. You're compliant.
But that brings a lot of scrutiny along with it as well, isn't it? So how do you kind of balance moving from a position where, yes, you are running a very well corporate governed company and all full board and everything, and then now suddenly being scrutinized by the public, and everything you say will move the stock market.
That's a little bit of a new experience. But no, tell me something outside of that. Even when you start a business, right? The reality is the day you decide to start a business, you are always under scrutiny. It just the nature of that scrutiny and sort of the scrutinizer may change. When we started out, our families were scrutinizing us, right? They would be like, "Ye kya kar rahe ho? You know, how are you guys surviving?" Your employees are scrutinizing you because they want to know that you're leading in the right direction. Your customers are scrutinizing you. I think the only thing that really changes when you go public is that you officially take the form as somebody who's a fiduciary of the public trust now. You have public money. You have a responsibility to use it as well as you can. Certainly not squander it away. And you therefore have to provide, you have a duty of care and a duty of account, right? You have to provide transparency in terms of, we had those systems. So we were pretty confident that being public wouldn't be very different. The only harrowing part, of course, is the people suddenly want to listen to what you have to say. For 15 years, nobody cares what you say.
You have to weigh all your words very carefully.
That is the biggest problem, and especially for a management team like ours, which is also why no social media.
Yes.
So, the less you say.
You decided social media much before that. I don't think it was.
Yeah, just appreciate that. I need to prepare for the time when the company is public and every word is weighed carefully. But also, Sahil, the other thing is that for the space that you're in, you have set the bar, you continue to disrupt. As the management team of a large and fast-growing logistics company, public company, how do you find that balance between short-term, where ultimately, the stock gets measured by short-term performance, but at the same time, you have to think long-term as well. You are thinking a few months, a few quarters ahead as well. So how do you find that balance between the here and now versus what we need to do to lay the foundation for the next phase of growth?
It's a process of evolution. You have to convince your shareholders. Yesterday was an event and the CEO of TI said something which was very interesting. He said fundamentally what has changed when you go public, when you're private, you choose your investors to a large extent.
Yeah.
When you go public, you no longer choose your investors, right? And you still have to find a way to align with them. I think that's why it becomes a question of how well you communicate what the story of your company is. Certainly people look at your short-term results, but it is your responsibility, your prerogative as a management team to enable people to view your results in the frame of your long-term actions.
Yeah.
That I think is what you have to, that's the hardest part when you go public, which is being able to communicate how the frame of a specific 3 months in your company's life cycle relates to a larger idea about what the company will become. And keep reminding people what the institution is that you're trying to build. Ultimately, we're all in this because we're trying to build something that is larger than ourselves and that outlives us to some extent. And that therefore by nature becomes an institution or a set of behaviors or a set of values or a set of sort of, capabilities that the organization has that is beyond any of our individual capabilities. One is defining that very clearly. So in our case, we've been able to tell investors, and some have bought it and some have not, saying that, look, Indian logistics will require high quality investments in capacity building for a sustained period of time. Along this way, this industry will go through ups and downs because the very form of this industry is changing. You are going from an unorganized industry towards an organized industry, and there will be competitions and setbacks along the way. There are large masses of people involved in these businesses, and so there's a certain inherent complexity to running them. And so our economics may vary at any point in time. But viewed over a larger arc of time, they move in one direction, and predictably so. So we have been able to point out which is also why I said we wanted to be the first people to go public, because we wanted to say this is how you look at our KPIs, this is how you look at capacity building, this is how you look at network utilization. And as we've done that, fortunately, or not fortunately, it is the design of the management team. The economics of the business have been consistent with the story that we've been, telling the public markets. And what happens is you build trust, one brick at a time, right? So when we went public, the first quarter, like I said, was crazy, right? I went on my first analyst call, people said, what do you think is happening? And I said, Indian consumption is slowing down.
Thankfully, you were not on social media, because there was a lot of chatter on social media about that first investor presentation by Sahil.
Man, that was something, right? Because I think I wiped out, and I do not say this lightly at all, right? But I think I wiped out 30,000 crores of market cap in something like a month, right? And I was quite sort of honestly worried about it, but I couldn't do much at the end of it. But my point was, this is true. Like there's, I believe that the Indian e-commerce market is slowing down because my numbers seem to tell me that that is the case. And we got dragged from pillar to post, man. There were some investors who just dumped the stock the next day, and I was upset about it and so on.
Even though the company hasn't changed, it's the same company, it's the same business.
It's the same company doing the same things, but somewhere what happened is in their assessment, what they thought was 15% growth rates, they thought, year on year, or 20% growth rates, they thought because I said that we were trying to signal a different future, perhaps their models changed. And it was very odd. But the good thing is, I think some of the investors in the public markets, specifically, some of the Indian mutual funds really do understand the market very well. They were obviously a little perturbed by what I'd said, but they sat down and they said, look, before we make a decision, why don't you come and see us? And we had a long conversation about this. And I think one of them, the feedback was, maybe you want to think about how you message these things the next time around, before you wipe out.
But it must have given good investors would have gotten a good opportunity to buy into your stock as well. And so I'm sure a lot of people would have taken advantage of that dip. But if a young founder is looking to start something in logistics space, how would you suggest he or she looks at this space, and what are the areas where you can build something big?
The good thing about logistics is if your definition of big is not, outrageous, and I don't know what that might be, building a large company in logistics is always possible. So anybody who's starting out in this space, there are only three things we have. We have people, real estate, and vehicles. Yes. Right now. So
I think those three things, acquiring those three things requires a lot of skill, capital, time, effort.
Effort comes first.
Yes.
Other things in our industry rack up quickly. But the reality is, look, a guy on a bike is potentially a competitor to delivery. That's the way we look at it, because he can deliver something somewhere and then he can hire somebody else to do it with him, and he's got 2 bikes. And then before you know it, he maybe has 300 bikes or 300 vans and can compete with you. But my advice to most people who get into this space is very simple, which is that it is deceptively easy to start a business in logistics, but like you were pointing out, after a while, if effort is the only thing that you're running on, it's deceptively hard to keep going and to build scale. So the starting point is to design right. Now, what do I mean by that? That means there are specific areas that you have to look for obvious flaws in design before you decide to get into that space. One example, for instance, that I can think of is temperature controlled logistics in India. It's a poorly sort of served space. Cold chain. Right? It's a fairly poorly served.
You guys do any cold chain? Or?
We actually don't. We don't do much. Partly because we haven't yet quite figured out how it, blends with all of the other business that we do. And our customer set's a bit different. But I think that, for example, is a place that I would advise somebody that the right design, the right kind of vehicles would be a great place to start. Can you do agri? That's something that we've never done. It's a wholly different supply chain, vastly interesting, massive spend. It requires a different kind of mindset. So there are spaces. My advice to anybody who starts is to think about these large spaces where there are obvious design flaws. Get in, and then the good thing, or come to Delhivery and raise capital from us. We'd be happy to fund.
Actually, the other related question would be how do you convince people to join? What has changed from when you started back then for people to now find this sector to be really attractive, to come and start work here? Because logistics generally is not on top of people's mind to either start something or even come and work for.
Think about it, man. What are the things that people ultimately are looking for, right? Let's say you're a senior leader and you want to test yourself as a leader of people, large numbers of people. Where are you going to find larger number of people than in a logistics company, right? So one of the easy ways is to bring them to these facilities and say, take a look at this, right? The average director at Delhivery or senior director at Delhivery, let me take a director at Delhivery, which is somebody who would manage a facility like this. This facility, of course, has a senior director, but he handles multiple facilities. The average director at Delhivery must be 30 or younger. and probably manages a workforce of 1,000 people at the bare minimum. So, one set of people get attracted to this job because that's the kind of people they are. They want to lead thousands of people. So that's an easy one. The second is people want to innovate. They want to do high quality work, right? Once again, bring them here, right? This came out of nothing. And the reality is our teams had to imagine what this facility would look like. They had to think about how the automation would get designed, commissioned, integrated, hooked up to our systems from a technology standpoint. It's a hugely complex technical problem, both if you're an industrial engineer, if you're an automation engineer, if you're a robotics engineer, if you're a product guy, data scientist, if you're a tech guy. So we bring people to these problems and we say, if you like problems at this scale, come and join us.
Do you do tours for schools and college students here?
We have done, interestingly, most Indian colleges don't seem to want to come, but if I remember right, a batch from Wharton comes every year and looks at our facilities.
Well, I think we should, after this, I'm definitely going to recommend a few schools and colleges to get to, because that's when it becomes real. If it's becoming real for old people like us, I'm sure, young starry-eyed kids, I'm talking about us, not you. But going back to the earlier thing that Sahil, you were saying, you really simplified it by saying that it's the delivery guys, it's the vehicles, it's the real estate. The magic happens when you connect all of them together in space and time. I can imagine the friends who joined delivery early on, they would tell us stories about how the address in India would be yellow house opposite a temple next to a peepal tree. And the problem is multi-layered in the sense that you first need to geocode it, you need to identify where exactly the place is, you need to figure out the optimal route, and then you need to optimize for supply and demand. What role does technology has played, and of course we are now at the cusp of one of the biggest technology shifts with AI. So how do you see that playing a role going forward?
The only reason delivery has any competitive advantages at all is because of what we've done from an engineering and from a technology standpoint. These are our single sort of biggest advantages. Like I said earlier, how you orchestrate the network is hugely important. How you decide where every box goes and what path it takes, who handles it, when. That's what all of our systems do. Addressing is one of many good examples of where the technology problem in India is non-trivial. In India, for example, even when I was coming here to this facility, the transit time that Google Maps shows you is actually not usually correct.
Yeah. Google Map outside of US is very challenging.
Get onto the road and the transit time keeps changing. It starts by saying 1 hour, then it becomes 1 hour 20 minutes, and by the time you get here, it's an hour and 50. So dealing with traffic, the variability of the weather, for example, how does that influence delivery outcomes? So in that sense, technology is sort of pretty core to what we do. The other part, of course, is this is one part of everything that is cool and more obviously visible. But if you look around you, you will see bigger boxes over there, and you'd see smaller boxes somewhere, right? Now, e-commerce parcel typically tends to travel in bags.
Yes.
And that's freight, which has to travel together. Most logistics companies, conventional wisdom in logistics always was that don't mix parcel and freight. Let them go on their own rails, because they have their own, requirements, they have their own destinies in terms of where they're getting to and so on. But one of the interesting technical challenges was to abstract our systems to say, recognize these as fundamentally the same units of logistics. And that's one of our big competitive advantages, which is it sounds easy to say, it is an extremely difficult problem to put into practice in the real world. So right from the architecture to sort of some of these more interesting applications, technology is pretty core to what we do. From an AI standpoint, look, the biggest application that we have that I can think of straight away is monitoring and control of what is fundamentally a chaotic system. Because, it rained in Chennai, and now suddenly you have to think about how your capacities are going to be affected, transit times are going to be affected, what you're going to carry, and you have to continuously resimulate thousands of different states of the world. Which is where having a network which is self-aware, which has the ability to control itself in real time without human intervention. Like, none of our network planners can decide with certainty whether a vehicle should take a specific path given everything that's come before it. It's very hard to do, right? And the more complex the network becomes, the even harder it gets. That's where I think the applications of AI come in. Real-time control, real-time monitoring, real-time decisioning on the ground, what to hold, what to move, which vehicles to have. There's obviously all the stuff around customer service and experience and everything else, but I think the substantial use for us, and then there's image processing, which we use a lot of, right? How do you manage this entire flow with fewer and fewer people over time? So those are really where our bets from an AI standpoint are going to be.
So your business does get impacted a lot by the real world signals as well, what is happening, as you said, real time, but also what is happening in and around the business. And which is what, Shobhit and we are building on Propheus, which is a physical AI company, figuring out how these real world signals impact the businesses. For you, how much of this AI have you already started to embed in your business, in your platform? And how much of is it like, future expectation in terms of where you would be?
So we started to, there are smaller pieces which we are starting to put together. For example, the vision systems which look at how we are handling the floor and taking certain decisions based on that. For example, sometimes as simple as alerting an operator to the fact that there is a problem on the floor, or alerting us to a security issue, for instance, in downstream facilities. These are starting to come, these are real in the sense that they're actually happening. We manage claims now, for example, we're able to handle a large percentage of our claims in an automated fashion. But a lot of it, I think, is yet to come, and the simple reason is aggregators of high quality information don't exist. The hardest problem is having the information with which to make a decision. I can build all the systems I want, but at the end of the day, if I don't have a way to get appropriate weather, location, geographic data and feed it to my systems, the quality of the output will be as bad as the quality of the input. And I feel like that's where we are dependent on other people to really sort of improve the quality of info that we get. So we're somewhat, I think, out into the future.
After this interview, we should talk about how we can work together as well. That was one of that is one of the objective of this.
That sort of thing. But coming back, so now some really interesting stuff about the culture that you've built at Delhivery. I think it's quite amazing. You mentioned Amazon. Amazon as a company is not necessarily known to be the highest paymaster, but it attracts and continues to attract high quality talent. A lot of it is mission driven, which you guys have done as well. We would always hear stories about, and I won't take names because you probably can guess them, people still at Delhivery who would tell us that both Zomato and Delhivery came out of Bain in Gurgaon when the companies raised funding and they were doing well. The Zomato guys, where the cars would be parked, you would see a Porsche or a Lambo
Ferrari.
Or something. And then in the Delhivery parking lot, you would see an Innova and an i20. And you had a Thar, I think, back in the day. So, and they would obviously say that there's such a big difference in the culture. What I'm guessing some of it was by design as well. What was that, and how much of that played a role in the culture at Delhivery?
And clearly you are not paying your employees much.
So I think over time we're a decent paymaster, but we do believe in the Amazon philosophy, or many companies have this philosophy where we pay well, but I think our long-term rewards stack up differently. I think on a very, very light note, look at where we are. We're in Hoskote. Nobody is bringing a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or whatever it is to Hoskote, right? So it's horses for courses. Yeah. So which is why we move around in Innovas and Thars, because the places that we go to often don't involve high quality roads. But no, look, on a very serious note, we said this right at the start. Our business works because we go to customers and say we will save you money. And when we want to save our customers money so that they can do more with the money that they have left over, that has to begin with the company itself being its most efficient form. And that means we have to look at everything that is potentially a wasted expense for us. And culturally, I think that also begins with the founders, the management team, sort of in their approach to all of this. So I think, we run some of the most expensive automation in the country. We buy the most expensive trucks in the country. But unfortunately, that may not leave us with enough to then go and have a fleet of Ferraris.
No, I think it's a good, and maybe because of that, probably, what we have heard from people and yourself as well, Sahil, that delivery never really got into a near-death kind of situation from a capital perspective. Because you have always been judicious in how you have used capital. Even while you guys went out drinking whiskey, I suppose, you always chose the Blender's Pride.
At the Theka in Gurgaon. But that is such an important lesson. I think this is where I think we should address the Gen Zs, because whenever we go out with a lot of these young people, most of them don't drink alcohol. And not to say that we should, this is not what this is about, but I think alcohol aside, or the Theka stories aside, how did that help build the social bonds, which I'm sure that fabric still lasts today and would have helped you go through a lot of thick and thin over the past 15 years?
Everybody should make their own choices, but I feel like a beer won't hurt people every now and then. And one of the hardest things to do when you're young and sort of in a confusing environment is to build the kinds of social bonds that sustain, a company of our kind, for example. And you have very little else to go on, right? We realized that we couldn't build a company by all being strangers to each other and clocking in and clocking out reliably at a specific time. Even today, to be fair, right? And that process, therefore, of unwinding at the end of the day with the team allowed us to do a couple of things here. One is you de-stress from the day. You sort of say, okay, look, things may have gone terribly for us today, but the very fact that 30 of us can get together at a place, have a beer, sort of, have it out and let it go, allows you to refocus a little bit. What happens is that you start worrying about issues as opposed to people, which sometimes can be difficult to do, and you sometimes realize it's also a great way to understand why people make some of the decisions that they do. Let's say someone made a bad decision at work, or somebody who runs a facility had a bad day, things didn't go well. Dealing with it out of the facility, dealing with it in a different sort of environment where it's de-risked and you can have kind of think, kya ho gaya, what happened, is often very helpful. And for us, that really helped. It also actually in the early days allowed us to communicate strategy and where we thought we were going, and to co-build it with the people who were there, right? And I think sometimes people don't want to have that conversation in a formal setting. I can call 40 people to the boardroom and say, let's discuss delivery strategy. Most likely what will happen is they will come with notebooks and pencils and stare at me and say, okay, tell us what it is, right? Yeah. But when you go out, the advantage is, and I don't mean like an offsite, because again, you guys just came from one, but even offsites tend to be sort of, they're a little bit like a summon. But when we were out at Machan back in the day, the good thing is everybody had a voice and everybody had a vote, right? So it didn't matter. You could be the junior guy who joined yesterday. I've had people who came on their first day and were telling us about what they thought delivery should do. And you'd naturally sort of listen to it. And that brought us closer as a team. That gave more people a voice at delivery. It helped them get to know each other, which maybe they might not have done in other circumstances. A guy from our team, one of the guys who was very early, Amit Ambassa, got married in Goa 3 days back. Yeah. And there were, I think, some 30 people from delivery, past and present, who had showed up and were there. And he's not exactly the most outgoing social guy, but that's what it does. Those bonds get built, and most of those people have stayed with the company over a very long period of time.
But you also had this strategy of, starting off with friends and family, friends mostly in this case. I mean, these days people talk about how, you should not run a company or start a company or work together with your friends. I mean, Shobhit and I, of course, we know each other for past 18 years and we are enjoying working together. But how do you think about this particular strategy of bringing friends together, starting a company, very hard environment?
Yeah, I have fairly controversial views on this. I disagree with the thinking that, strangers work better together in a way. The biggest advantage of, the great privilege of our life has been we get to come into work every single day for 15 years and work with our closest friends there. The advantage is trust is built fast. These are people who've known you, or you make friends with the people who come and join as well, and over time they get to know you extremely well. They know where, what motivates you. Then they can hang in with you when the going gets tough, which it inevitably does at some point. You asked the question right at the start, saying, is it lonely at the top or the bottom? And, I suspect if I didn't have all of these advantages of having people I know and trust working, alongside a delivery, it would have been pretty lonely and difficult. I'm not even sure I would have lasted the course, to be perfectly blunt.
We wanted to ask, Sahil, Delhivery has kind of transformed the logistics sector. You may agree or not agree, but hopefully you agree with this.
It's at the bar.
Yeah,
It is the bar now.
technology, efficiency and all. But also internationally, you have been able to bring a lot of technology from outside and convince people to come and invest here and work with you. So one of the examples was, which we were talking about, was the Volvo vehicles. These are the best vehicles which Volvo has created, the most advanced one globally. And it took some convincing for you and the team to bring those trucks into India, and now they are the best performing trucks globally for Volvo.
Yeah, we spoke about this. Arun, Shubkriti, Ajit, Achint and Co were the guys who did this. And again, I'm going back to the same thing. I think it's not that the trucks weren't there. The hard part for Volvo or for any other company outside India was imagining that people would pay that much for these trucks and put them to good use. Historically in India, the reason why most expensive trucks didn't make sense is the truck would drive on average only 8,000 kilometers a month. And I remember when Arun and his team and everyone, they did the modeling, they said, we can make these work if our trucks drive more than, I think at that point, 18,000 kilometers a month, which was sort of mind-blowing in a sense, because people were like, wow, you're going to drive the truck 600 kilometers a day. Yeah. Can you even do that? Yeah. And this truck, I think, cost 2.5 times sort of the standard 32 feet trucks that we were buying. And Arun said, yeah, I think I can actually make these trucks drive 600 kilometers a day. And where we are today, so he went to Volvo. I remember he went to Sweden. He worked with them. He sort of helped them understand why in e-commerce logistics this would make sense. They had valid questions saying this price point, how are you ever going to be able to afford our trucks? I suppose their question was, are you just going to buy 3 trucks and then sort of, is that it? And I think over time they came, they looked at our operations, and Arun was really able to convince them. He ran them through the maths, and credit to them. They said, okay, we'll start making these in India. Today, I think we are probably north of 900 or 1,000 of these trucks running all over, including now their LNG versions and everything else. So I guess it goes back to the same thing. I think it was painting the vision with them. And to be honest, they worked a lot on it as well. They brought the price point down. They redesigned the cabin of the truck, working with Arun and team for Indian conditions. So,
yeah. And so what is next for Delhivery in terms of, what are you looking at? Is it drone delivery, some other technology?
And personally also, what is it that you are excited about when it comes to delivery, looking ahead?
I think what I'm most excited about always is, given the kind of industry we're in, I don't know what the company will look like in 5 years. And that's very, very exciting. It's a little scary. We were talking about it when we started. This was not part of the plan. Yeah. This isn't something we'd imagined, and look, here we are. And that's just incredibly exciting, right? Because there's so much happening. Indian urban topologies are changing, infrastructure is changing, people's expectations of, speed have changed dramatically. What form that will take from an engineering standpoint, from a technology standpoint, is unknown. We have new tools. So I'm super excited about seeing what that's all going to look like. In a physical business, that's the beauty of it. What will delivery look like? So I don't have an answer to your question except to say, what are we aiming for? I think our aim is, today we're about $1 billion in revenues or whatever it is. This market is 100 times our size. We will continue to do everything connected to moving boxes. So one is move all kinds of boxes, which was the easy part. Move e-commerce, parcel, move part freight, move full truck freight. Then we said boxes move and boxes are stored. So we went from doing transportation to doing warehousing. Then we started saying all of this technology that we've built in-house, why should Delhivery be the only company that has access to this kind of technology? So we've started to actually provide our technology as a service to other companies.
Other logistics companies?
Including other logistics companies as well.
You don't see them as a competitor?
They are, but the reality is this market is big enough for dozens of deliveries to survive. And the other thing, of course, in logistics you have to remember is interchangeability between networks. It's like airline code sharing. It matters a lot, right? Like, you'd be happy to fly on Indigo from here to Dubai if you could then from there get onto an Emirates flight and go to London or whatever it is. So we need to have the ability to share. We will not always have all of the capacity we need. So we're trying to do that. Then how people finance the movement of their boxes is important. There's working capital involved in this chain, there's insurance in this chain, and we have a lot of information about what is being transacted. So that's next. There will be alternate forms of delivery. Drones are interesting for specific kinds of deliveries. We just tested out in UP. One example is we think organ delivery, for instance, lends itself to drones in congested urban environments, rural delivery, medication. So all of this is on the cards as long as it's linked to moving boxes.
So when you look at this space, and this is a massive space, and you have 5 or 6 of these, do you say, oh wow, are you filled with pride, or is like, I need to do better? Or both?
Both, more like. I think very proud of, it's always a proud moment driving in and to see this. But I already feel like this system, even though it's not reached its limits, I already am worried that, what comes next? At double the scale, do these systems work? Probably not. So we have to effectively junk these and restart again. So I'm also worried when I look at them. I'm not just happy or proud.
So, Sahil, the story doesn't complete itself unless we talk about where it all started. So it all started in a part of India where I think you spent a lot of your childhood in Ahmedabad, and then you wanted to go out to some other part of the country. But growing up, I think you were involved in a lot of extracurricular activities like quizzing and sports in particular. And I remember at IIM Bangalore also, you were a Sepak champion. For the uninitiated, Sepak is a footer volley, and Sahil was undisputed champion at that time. What role has extracurricular in general, but sport in particular, played in your life and continues to play? Because you're always fit, but you look fitter now than probably in college. And I think you do more Ironman, etc. in Goa. So what role does sport play and personal wellness play for you, not just as an individual, but how that has helped you as a leader, leading Delhivery over the past 15 years and hopefully for the next few decades as well?
And what would your advice be to the young people as well?
Play as much as you can. That's a very easy one. Play anything, anywhere, every day, and with everyone you can find. It's as easy as that. That's the easiest question of this whole sort of podcast. Just to set the record straight, in case I'll get called out for it, Vikrant Behel and Nishant Gupta were the undisputed Sepak champions at IIM Bangalore. But we were not too bad.
It was a test and you passed. So
we were probably second or third best maybe. But no, on a serious note, I was lucky, right? I grew up on the campus of IIM Ahmedabad. And my dad played cricket competitively till his dad told him that there's no career in cricket.
There was no IPL that time.
There was no IPL at the time.
Very different.
Yeah. And my dad still thinks that, he could have missed out. But history repeats itself. When I thought I would build a career in sport as well, my dad would tell me there's no career in sport. So I was like, okay. But no, I grew up on campus, and since my dad had played, I think I was kicked out of the house on a regular basis and told that it didn't matter, like I said, what I played, as long as I sort of built up as many different sporting skills as I could. So I played badminton, I played table tennis, I swam a lot. I played pretty much anything. Why sport? Very simple, yeah. I think, even at Delhivery, the hardest years at Delhivery were the years I wasn't playing or that I wasn't doing anything, which was 2011 to 2016. And a few things happened. One is, and that's how I got into running and got into triathlon and stuff. One is you need a certain amount of discipline to manage any form of sporting activity. It doesn't matter, whether you're playing tennis or whether you're playing cricket or football or whatever it is. Even the simple act of waking up at 6 in the morning to go with, 10 other guys warming up and then, playing football with them, that discipline, I think, is exceptionally necessary. It forces you to be disciplined about your time and about everything else. The second sort of big advantage that I've usually found, that's why I got into triathlon as opposed to team sports again, is it's a real opportunity to unwind. Endurance sports endurance is in the name, and so you learn to do pointless activities for very large amounts of time. right? There are days when, my training schedule will be 3.5 hours. So you'll start training and then you just
How do you find all this time? You're running a $5
why he's in
billion
Goa.
company. Yeah?
wake up in the morning, do it late night, do your work while you're on the bike. So
I keep telling Shobhit we should be doing that. I do that often and he makes fun.
yeah, it works. It actually does work. So, I've taken conference calls on the bike and so on. But no, it's just that, right? You're there and there's nothing else. It's just you and you're focused and you're thinking. So either if I have a problem that I want to think about, I can do it while I'm running or cycling. Or if I don't want to think about anything at all and I just want to sort of unwind from the day, the easiest way is to just, wear your shoes and get out. So the discipline, the process of sort of focusing on a specific objective. And ultimately the other thing is, I feel like sport just makes us better people.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. You don't matter as much. Even when you're playing a competitive match against somebody, you learn the fact that it's the two of you who make the game happen, right? At some level. Even if somebody wins, somebody loses is fine. And there's a certain, therefore, amount of camaraderie that gets built in. So it's fundamentally an egoless process, playing sport. So I feel like not enough people play sports anymore. At Delhivery, we are really trying to push that very hard, saying do something, move, run.
So you have started a delivery run club now instead of the whiskey club.
The Whiskey Club also persists.
Okay.
Life is.
So do you have more people in the run club or in the whiskey club?
There are as many people in the fitness club as there are. Many of the people who are in the fitness club are members of the fine whiskey club, the Blenders Pride Club. But yeah, we're trying to do that really hard. Yeah. So we partner with OGQ. We sponsor Ironman in India. We work with High Rocks. We sponsor individual athletes across a range of random sports. Some which people would be amazed that these even exist. We've done trail runners. We've done we've done a mountaineer in the past. From back then. So anything that inspires the delivery team to be fit. The other reason, by the way, just from a purely selfish standpoint, why founders and senior management I always feel should be fit. Your job depends on you being able to be at your physical best, as much as you can. I mean, we have teams which unfortunately for reasons of geography are based in Delhi where the very air that they breathe, 4 months a year is a problem. Now, I would certainly selfishly like to have a fitter team, which is healthy. And I feel like you're just at peak performance.
Yeah, we talk about it quite a bit, and what we have been realizing of late is that young people get sick quite quickly. I don't know whether it's the weather thing or it's just that. Is it same with your company as well, or?
Depends. I mean, it depends on every office. Delhi is obviously the rate of illness is higher. But if I look at our office in Goa, for example, a very large percentage of the office comes to the gym and works out. And at the end of the day, there's no substitute for exercise, rest, diet, and sort of just, that balance. Unfortunately, you can't sort of eat supplements or, there's no point wearing a fitness tracker if you're not fit. There's no point eating supplements if you're not going to exercise. So we're sort of pretty basic in that regard. We keep thinking about it. In fact, I think maybe there's a good place for me to announce it. But I think Suraj is going to mandate from now on that our entire senior management team above a certain grade will have a minimum fitness standard that they need to pass.
Is that a weight or something else?
It's not weight. Weight is not just the purest indicator. You have to have a certain physical fitness and commitment to
some version of a yo-yo test for delivery.
In some senses, because our job is also physical. We have to walk and move things, and so yeah.
And you are an avid reader as well, Sahil. So I think it's a good unwinding thing to do, I suppose. But how do you find time to do all this? And you travel a lot as well.
Always carry a book. So I have 3 in my bag at any point in time, and read everywhere. You'll be surprised at how much time you actually really have, right? You're on a flight.
Do you read the proper paperback hardcover books or on phones and?
I can't read on a device. I mean I can manage long form like magazine articles and all on the computer, but I've never been able to make a Kindle work. But the easiest way, like I said, I always have a book on me. So wherever I have time, just open it up and start reading. It's easiest.
So you made a decision very quickly that US is not for you. You came back to India. Turned out quite well. But a lot of people are, as we speak, going through this conundrum. They have probably spent a lot more time than you did in the US. They built a life for themselves, and they're now at a point where they are starting to think about, or they are being forced to think about, whether I should stay or should go back home to India. What would you say to them?
And I think even for people who are now in double mind, because a lot of young people who are coming out of college, they are deciding whether they should stay back in India, work for all these new age companies, there is huge growth, or go out, do studies, or work in a different country as well. For them also, and when you took this decision, I think, you had not thought about delivery, so you didn't really think that I will build a business in India. So,
I love the chaos of India, and it had nothing to do with the economic opportunity or anything else. Just fundamentally, it's a place where I felt connected. In the US, I felt very lonely when I was there. Even when I worked at Bain in London briefly, it was lovely. The office was fantastic. The work was great. But I don't have an easier way to say this than just to say that I wasn't from there. And, I'd spent all my life in India. I loved the chaos of being here. A logistics business is about as chaotic as it can get. So in some senses, our love for this country is perhaps reflected in the kind of business we run. To anybody who's thinking about it, I always, to your question around what should people who are at that cusp in the US think about, I always tell people come back. Not for the fact that your family is here and all that. Of course, that should be a driver. But what's really holding you back? Are the economic opportunities in India going to be to measure up to your level of qualifications that you have in the US? Certainly today. There's no doubt. The number of Indian companies that would be happy to have talented people from outside is massive. That's one, right? So the economic opportunity, the intellectual opportunity, the market in India is dynamic enough. The second more sort of weird thing that I've come to believe the older I've gotten, and I'm not sure I believed this when I was 25 either, to be honest, but I'd lose no opportunity to lecture on this, is that I feel like you have to build the kind of place you want to live in, right? And that's a responsibility that everybody does have. And if the youngest and brightest people in India don't hang around and build and struggle with what it means to build a business in India, or what to do anything in India for that matter, it's not entirely clear to me how things are ever going to get any better without that. So my pitch to people always is just that, right? You want a better future, that you want to work on reducing pollution in India, go for it. Come here and do it. Don't sit outside and lecture. You want to figure out how to get healthcare to people at lower costs, come here and do it. And whenever masses of people in India do that, I feel like great things, somehow eventually this magic in some weird way happens. There's a lot to not like about any place as in India. So my advice to everybody who's young and going out is the action's here, the excitement is here, you're young, you have energy, there's chaos, go for it. Why live in a structured world when you have all this?
So you decided to come back to India, and then Halliburton happened, which you didn't go for. And then your parents convinced you to write CAT because what can go wrong? And then you ended up at Bangalore. Yeah. Was Ahmedabad an option or not an option at all?
No. Even mentally it was always difficult. If I did well, people would say it's because my dad was there. If I did badly, people would say, even though your dad is there, you did so badly. And so, fortunately, that choice wasn't there. The choice for me was really between Bangalore and Calcutta. I was trying to figure out where to go. I was leaning towards Calcutta because I was told they didn't have an attendance policy.
Yes, they don't have an attendance policy, but also they have a herb corner.
Yes.
Yeah, which is quite famous in Calcutta.
We're not talking about Ayurveda, are we?
Kolkata has a herb corner there.
I'm not sure I would have been a G-Lord, but still. But Calcutta was also very exciting. But finally, I think Bangalore was just better weather, and felt like a bigger city. So.
And you met awesome people like that?
I met awesome people, so many.
You didn't know about it at that time, but that was written. So it was going to happen at some point. So. But when you came to Bangalore, I think you did feel that you don't belong here. So. And for quite some time you were not interacting with a lot of people, you were just trudging along. What changed?
People were nice, I realized. My first 3 months were very strange, like you pointed out, because I came as a fresh mechanical engineer into this classroom where we were suddenly, there were questions like, two people are fighting at work. What will you do about this? And I said, I have no idea. I just got here yesterday. So it's quite, I felt like I had no value to add. And all of our classmates, like if you go back to business school, right? The thing is that everyone over time becomes, I've also learned it later, but everyone looks very competent. And they were there and I said, man, these guys know everything. Like they are discussing what to do when two people fight at work. They seem to know which way the financial markets are moving. I seem to know nothing at all. And so I kept very quiet. The professors would ask questions and would you like to say something? No, I don't want to say anything at all.
I don't have a view on
I have no view on this. And so it was sort of that version of not being on social media. I felt like I had nothing important to say and why would anyone want to listen anyway? So I think our classmates also initially were like, yeah, this guy, maybe he doesn't know anything. And so it took some time. But I think by the time we reached the second term, people were like, okay, and sport happened. That's the other reason to play, right? The intersection sports happened. I played badminton, got to know a lot of people. And suddenly people were like, oh, okay, you seem to know something, and who are you? And then I think once that happened, they were kind enough to sort of let me into their various clubs and groups. I got to know a lot more people.
But also it's, it's probably in your mind as well, more than people not wanting you to. Yeah.
That there's no question. I told you, I was the one who felt like an imposter, right? And the other simple reason was just one thing. I think as a fresher specifically, but even among freshers, I had no agenda for what to do with my education at IIM Bangalore. I didn't know what to do when I came. I knew I was there and I would come to class and do my best, but everybody had a point of view, right? They said, I'm going to be an investment banker, I'm going to be a consultant, I'm going to go to Unilever, I'm going to be, whatever, something or the other. And I had just kind of floated my way to business school and had no idea. And that's why I felt like I was a misfit, because it felt like everybody had a purpose for why they were there.
But that was also probably not true, because a lot of people were still figuring out what they wanted to do as well.
But they were engaging in a very real conversation with people. I had nothing to ask. So fortunately, my mentors were two guys who were sort of very similar in some senses. And so when I went to them and said, listen, I don't know what I want to do, so don't worry about it, let's play Sepak. And so Deepak Krishnamani and Arvind Rayappa were my mentors, and Madhurjo Banerjee. So they were all very kind about it. So I think they were my only friends, I think, in the first 3-4 months.
Do you remember any ragging?
Did I do any or undergo any?
You remember? No, you did rag Shobhit.
I ragged a few people, yeah.
Shobhit will narrate the incident as well.
No, but there is this conversation that has been trending more recently on social media about MBA or no MBA. Should you do an MBA or should you not do an MBA? I mean, personally, the experience that you narrated, and we all went through this at IIM Bangalore in the first few days and weeks, which is, it's a really humbling experience, because you just look at any direction, you just see these high flying super achievers. They seem to know things, very competent people. They know how to resolve office disputes even though they've never worked before.
Everyone is raising hand in the classroom.
Everyone is raising hand in class. So it is a humbling experience, but I'm sure there's more that you got out of it. What is your advice to people who are having this question in their minds? Should I do an MBA or should I not do an MBA?
Yeah, I feel like, let me put it this way, the signaling impact or effect of a formal education has certainly reduced in the last 15 years. Even as an employer, I can say we don't really care about it, much anymore. To the extent that we can use it to reference check someone, maybe, but I don't really bother about where you studied and what you studied. So maybe one way to look at it is that the building of those technical skills, that foundation that college or IIM would give you, is perhaps not as relevant anymore. But if you look at Delhivery as an example, we have a large number of people who come from IIM Bangalore or from IIT Delhi or from specific schools around the country. And I think to the extent that it allows you to build a network, it's still perhaps a valuable social experience that's worth going through. And especially, see, I came from a much smaller city. I came from Ahmedabad. And for me to meet all of these people who would come from all of these different places was actually very unique. And so if you're coming from Ranchi or from, a small town in UP or a small town in West Bengal or something, it can be a formative experience to come and get an MBA. But on the balance, I don't know which way the social media debate is leaning, and I'm worried that I'm on the wrong side of this.
No, it's okay.
But on the balance, I feel like maybe not getting an MBA today is not a bad choice for most people. Or any formal education, do you really need it? I don't know.
But also, I mean, from a formal education perspective, yes. But also finding a network, as you mentioned, or finding people, who are maybe similarly thinking, you can make great bonds. So the way I think about it is, if you have gone to these institutions, employers will come and find you easily because you have some or the other person who is working in some of these organizations, and they go out and try and look for people from these cohorts. If you're not coming from these organizations, it's still easy to find a job and everything, but then you have to go out and put in a bit more effort.
You're right. And there's an entirely different problem about whether this is inadvertently sort of a caste system effectively. But leaving that aside, which it is, but leaving that aside for a moment, and the whole old boys club problem, I feel like you need to develop the ability to, most people should have the ability to sort of find a job that they want to do, reach out. That says a lot about a person.
Yeah.
Some of the people who we've hired mainly for sometimes even just their sheer persistence.
Yes.
In saying, you have to give me a job. And so they're okay, fine. This, you had this discussion 3 times, fine. So
Please don't keep sending me so many emails with presentations.
But I don't know, it's hard to say. I feel like employers should care less, though to be honest, even as we go, like I said, when we have to do reference checks and so on, we do care at those moments sometimes. We try to be more indifferent. But no, still leaning towards maybe not.
Okay, so we are coming to the last few parts. We come back to today. You are growing the team, you're hiring people. I'm sure you have very young people on the team at Delhivery, Gen Zs. What is it? Have you worked with them? Is there any quality that stands out that you really like and something that you think they need to change or improve on?
We have a lot of young people.
Do you interact with them often?
I feel really old when you ask questions like that. But it's like, do you interact with the young people? I'm like, yes, I do. It's my job. So, yes, of course.
No, because you're not on social media. So, the only way for you to know the trend of Gen Z people is interacting with them.
No. We have so many of them in the office in any case. What I like is a couple of things. One is they certainly seem to be less inhibited than I was when I was starting out. And it's refreshing to have people who are quite blunt. And I'm not exactly known for tact either. So it's quite, nice to see that.
So you were Gen Z when Gen Z didn't happen?
No, I said nothing at all. So because I was tactless, I could get away with silence.
No, you were quite blunt as well. I've heard some of the board meetings where you have been very blunt as well.
But I like that. I feel like, they're quite clear. And even on some of the things that they get a lot of hate for sometimes, I've heard people in our office also complaining about things. I think we had somebody who once didn't come into work, and I think my chief of staff at that point, she asked saying, why didn't you come to work? And the guy said, I didn't feel like it. And she was quite upset. And then we both thought about it a little and said, but why is that a bad reason? Exactly. If you think about it objectively, would I rather have, maybe he could have, she told me the thing, she's like, why didn't he lie? So that's a good point, but I'm not sure that that's better. At least it was honest saying I didn't feel like coming in today, so I didn't come in. Theek hai, will the company survive? Yeah, it probably will. So it's not the end of the world. But I feel like they're resetting the dynamic at the workplace a little bit, which is good. I have not found any of the young people at Delhivery particularly hard to work with personally at all. I feel like there's a lot of energy that they bring. That said, given that I don't interact with them as much as I should, I wonder if that also leaves the possibility of getting disillusioned very fast. I don't know. We have had people obviously who joined Delulu, who joined and left very fast. And I don't know, maybe 5 years into their careers, they'll be like us, but it's a good change, man.
But do you think they give up pretty quickly as well? I mean, are they at it for long periods of time, and is that something which they should think about?
We found if you give people the right problems, they do tend to stick with them. It's when they're disillusioned with the problem itself that they give up. It's not, and that responsibility, I think, the people who guide them or work with them really do have. I feel like that's fundamentally changed in the workplace, right? Earlier, what used to happen is that as somebody who led a team of 10 people, your job was to do most of the heavy lifting and then parse out, saying you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this, and just monitor them and sort of, essentially babysit them. Today, and justifiably and rightfully so, people come back and say, look, tell me what it is that we're trying to solve and why we're trying to solve it, and then I will try and figure out how to do it on my own. And I may not get it right, and that's all right, but I'll do my very best. That changes what you have to do as somebody managing the team. It means you give up control. So the way I look at it, I feel like even if people are giving up, the right question for me, if I was managing them, is why is that happening? Is that because I haven't done a good enough job of figuring out, what problem they want to work on? Did they not understand why it's important? People have always worked on things hard when they think it's important, right? I can't see why Gen Z would be any different than anyone else.
When you're hiring the young people, are there any specific qualities that you're hiring for, or that you're looking at, that are the markers for them to be to increase the probability of them staying and contributing positively to delivery?
We found that when younger people with less experience, one of the single markers for success at delivery, which works without fail, is sheer enthusiasm, even in the interview process. And by that I don't mean just sort of being cheerful all the time, but they're we've hired guys in sales, for example, who've grown 2 levels in a year because they just want to go and talk to customers all the time. They're enthusiastic about meeting them. When we have a problem, when we don't deliver on time, they're enthusiastic about figuring out why that happened, how to solve it, and they will start marshalling people together. So I feel like that innate sort of sense, when you're interviewing somebody, are they asking you questions which are pointing out problems at delivery? One of my favorite questions is, what do you think we don't do well, and what's your worst experience been with delivery? How would you have done it differently? And sometimes people give you very boring answers where you can see that they're not really engaged with it. It's kind of like, oh, you should have delivered it on time. And it's like, oh, thanks, we knew that. But, how do you think we should have done this differently? And sometimes you'll get people who'll come with these detailed answers saying, went through your app, this is what doesn't work very well. Why haven't you thought about communicating it like this? And when you see that, irrespective of whether that person has experience or not, we try to hire at that moment. These are people who are ambitious. These are people who, I think, move us forward. So just pure enthusiasm and communication, the ability to communicate at the youngest levels.
So when you think about your life career, when you were a student as well, Sahil, what are some of the things from your life, and you are considered generally a successful person with a company, $5 billion company now, the CEO, and people would want to learn from you. Yeah? So if some 20-year-old is asking you today, what are the 2 things I should learn from you, but also what are the 2 things I should not learn from you, what would you tell them?
Wow, start a business with your friends and have the time of your life is one thing I feel like people should learn. And make it your life's work to work with people you like. I think that's lesson 1 and 2 almost together, but lesson 2, like I said, play something, anything, all the time, wherever you can, and read as much as you can. Maybe 3 lessons instead of 2. But the first one I really can't stress enough, right? Who you work with over a long arc of time matters a lot more than what you work on.
Then the work doesn't feel work as well. You're going to your friends, working with them.
Right. When I was growing up, this isn't what I wanted to do. Right. When I was in engineering school, this isn't what I wanted to do. I didn't even want to be at business school. When I was at business school, this isn't what I wanted to do. So you never know. But it's the people you work with who matter. So find good people, work with them, work with your friends. Life will seem much easier that way perhaps. Play sports and read a lot and have fun. It isn't worth it if it isn't fun, right? I tell that to everybody who joins delivery as well, saying, for God's sake, have fun. You know, we will do terribly on some days. Yeah, like, so we do 1 billion orders a year. When we're 99% accurate, we're pissing off 1% of 1 billion people. So, or 98% accurate, we say, you know, we piss off the population of Australia every year.
That's a very good way to...
Which is going to happen. And the question is, how do you get better and how do you not let it kill you? Things to not learn from me. Oh, man, that's a reasonably long list.
You're perfect. You're perfect.
It's a long list.
More things to not learn than things to learn, man, to be honest. You know, it used to be worse. It's not fully resolved just yet. I feel like maybe not learning, a little diplomacy goes a long way. I feel like having a better control on your emotions is better. I'm not very good at this at all at work, certainly not. My team will attest to this. And, you know, sometimes I do feel like maybe this is going to be in the video and it's going to come out, but anyway. You do sometimes have to adjust the standards you expect of people to correct for, you know, where they are at that specific moment in time. I'm not necessarily good at that. And that's something to not learn from me. I feel like we lionize this idea that everybody has to be held to one incredible standard. And that's the only way to build a great business. Maybe that's not true. You know, and the older you get, the more you realize that. So I would not recommend learning that from me at all. I used to be more impulsive, I suppose. Yeah, that's not a good thing to learn from me either. And I'm very bad at social media.
Which may be good, you know.
You're working on it, so it's improving.
Yeah.
No, but on a more serious note, what I mean is that I tend to enjoy being isolated a lot more. Maybe that's not something that's worth learning from me. Overall, you know, I have the joy of working with my friends, of course, but outside of that, yeah.
So given all, even despite of all these shortcomings, you have been fairly successful when people look at you. But how do you define success for yourself?
I'm happy. That's success, man. I'm happy, I'm healthy. My parents are close by. My friends are close by. You know, I've had the opportunity to have this adventure along the way. That is, if that's not success, I'm not sure what is.
Sahil, one thing that came up in our previous conversations was, and I'm sure this is beyond the fact that you've built this and you built a $5 billion business that will continue to grow. You've done it with your friends. You're having fun. But you mentioned that there was someone who joined as a delivery guy, and he stayed at the company, and he's now, I think, a director or senior director, and he has created, I would guess, wealth that he probably wouldn't have thought of or imagined in his wildest dreams. Are those the most heartwarming things that go even beyond all of this? And I'm sure there are some other anecdotes as well.
Of course it is. There's absolutely no question. To have played even the tiniest part in somebody else, you know, you've done this, 50 people in your car, you know, when somebody grows and you've had an opportunity to play a part in that, I mean, that's far more gratifying than anything else, right? To somebody who didn't have the privilege necessarily of going to engineering school or business school or whatever, or studying commerce or whatever it is, coming in, starting as a delivery agent, working their way to senior director is the stuff that, you know, you read about, and it's an incredible sort of thing to be part of. 99% of the credit goes to the person for making it, right? But that 1% that you can take for saying, okay, we sort of were able to create that opportunity is important. So that's one example. But even I spoke about Vikas, who joined the company very early. You know, when we went public, Vikas and Amit Ambasta rang the IPO bell. And I still have that photograph. And it's incredible, right? One is because it's a moment when we went public. But the other is to see these two guys and to remember what we were like when they joined and to see how they've grown along the way. It's a memory for the ages, man. So I think the people stories at delivery one day we should document. But if we started doing that, that's the best thing, that every facility I go to, I can meet somebody who's been with the company 10 years, 12 years, and they all have a story of something that we've done together, you know, as a company. That's the best part of doing this job.
It's incredible. We have heard about so many of these stories coming out of delivery as well. So
Yeah.
and friends and people we know.
Yeah.
and I'm sure that you have only written 1% of the stories. There's a much larger set of stories that will get written over the next few decades. With that, we'll just go last two things. One is rapid fire and then Gen Z. You want to do the Gen Z first?
Let's.
I think that he will slay it.
Shall we do the Gen Z slangs first? Okay.
Well, am I supposed to guess what the slang means?
What it
I mean,
means,
you have guessed already. Few of those you know already.
Delulu, I'm
The
aware.
first one in my list. was
Delulu, I know. Delusion.
The second one was slay, which I've already told you, so you know the answer already. Okay, third one is like serious, yeah. No cap.
What's
I already answered it.
sorry? What's the word?
No cap.
Oh, okay. no cap. Yeah.
I already answered it. I said,
No cap
this one
is-
serious. No cap. It means I'm serious.
Oh, it means I'm serious. Okay.
Okay, this is the easy one. Vibe. Vibe.
Vibe is like the aura of something.
I mean, aura is a separate word, but vibe is the mood.
The mood. Okay. We had somebody, by the way, who I know of a friend who said somebody left a company because they said the vibe wasn't right.
The cafe is such a vibe. This has such a good vibe. We are having a good time.
No cap.
Good vibe.
No cap.
No cap. Aura. Aura, the cool energy around you.
Aura is the vibe.
No, I mean vibe is for a place, but aura is for a person.
Right.
NPC.
Not politically correct.
No, did you play games, video games and all?
I did.
So there used to be these characters who would.
Oh, non-playing character.
Exactly.
Damn. Okay.
I don't think that's a Gen Z term, to be honest.
They are
coming
appropriating
back.
all the cool things to Gen Z. That shouldn't be the case.
Brat.
Sorry, what?
Brat.
Brat. Brat is. No, wait, I know this. You say like something is brat, right?
Person is brat.
A person is brat. A person is awesome, very cool.
Shamelessly playful. Like you are.
He is giving a definition. You might be getting the meaning right, and maybe they will tell you. What else?
I think that's it. Bussin. 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 I may not be pronouncing it correctly. Is it bussin?
I don't know.
Bussin.
Bussing.
Something is bussin'. Is it buzzing? Something is awesome.
Insanely good.
Okay, so everything is a word for awesome. So that's okay. Say 8 different words for awesome.
They have goat, but goat is not a Gen Z.
They're just
They're
appropriating
Gen Z
all
one,
the
yeah.
good things to
It
Gen Z.
doesn't
That
make
is
sense.
unfair. Okay, rapid fire, quick answers. You want to do a few?
No, start there.
Morning or night? You're a morning person or night?
Both. Actually, both. Seriously. Late nights and early mornings.
Introvert or extrovert?
Introvert.
Okay, your favorite movie?
Almost famous.
Oh, nice. Favorite book?
Oh, my favorite book. The Remains of the Day.
Favorite place to visit?
The Isle of Skye in Scotland.
How many times have you been there?
There was a time I was going every year. So many. I can't even remember. Maybe 6 times, 7 times.
Do you play golf?
No, not at all.
Scotland is very famous for golf as well.
Scotch as well. So he has that.
Yeah, I go for the Scotch.
Who plays you in a movie?
Rajpal Yadav. I don't know. I'm making this up. I have no idea. Somebody who's very tall, I suppose. Sanjay Dutt.
Coffee, tea, or matcha?
Coffee.
Okay, I mean, in your life, you would have had mentors, yeah? So, can you name 2 of your most favorite mentors?
Well, my dad is right at the top of the list. Second mentor. Well, Sandeep Barasia, who worked with me for so many years, right? And I worked with him and started with him. I think I learned a lot from him. Sandeep, Suraju, my dad, 3 people.
And what about some of the people you have not met?
Inspiring
people
figures.
inspiring
I think you mentioned about FedEx.
Yeah, Richard Smith, no question. I mean, there's millions of people to be inspired by, man. From a business standpoint, Bezos, without question. It's an incredible story again, Amazon. Yeah, I'm going to stop with that.
A superpower, if you were a superhero, what would be a superpower that you would pick?
doing nothing for very long periods of time.
You can't do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think
in books, this I wanted to know as well. Fiction or non-fiction? What do you prefer?
Both. I read obsessively, so both. I'll read anything.
And why Goa?
Said no one ever, but why not Goa? It's a lovely place. It's fantastic. I get hours of my life back being in Goa.
But did you like kind of select between few cities, or no? It was like Goa is where I want to be.
Though it was at the end of it, it was just Goa. We knew that would work. It was still a risk when we moved. We didn't know how successful it would be, but we were certain we could make it work. Why Goa? Great weather, close to every sort of major city. It's a 40-minute flight to Bombay, 40 to Bangalore. Fantastic infrastructure, great people, beaches. Though Goans go to beaches a lot less than you'd imagine. And locals. I now think of myself as a local. We go much less than
nearer to church kind of thing.
We're just where we are. Just the beaches, and it's like asking a Delhiite how often they go to the Red Fort. Not that often. So,
but I think this is it, right?
Yeah.
First of all, thanks for doing this. I know as much time as you spent on this, you spent almost the same amount of time driving to come here by yourself in Bangalore. So we can't thank you enough. Thank you so much, and also thank you for building all of this. This is, it's quite something to